those who are from my parish will probably tell you that I'm not want to use sports analogies, but I do feel a little bit like the cleanup guy. I felt I needed to have to kind of weed out a lot of the things because so much stuff was covered so well. And for me, freedom primarily means that I'm called to be a servant of God's purpose, bring fulfillment to that purpose, and which is that all are called, God's purpose is the sanctification of all. As a citizen of this nation, I have an obligation to respect, encourage, and enable those who hold a different vision of freedom from my own. As both a citizen and a Christian, I must always engage any conflict of vision with respect for those I am at odds with, and strive to construct a place where cooperation and unity of purpose must prevail. All these have been very well covered by the previous speakers. I personally am not a political philosopher or even a political scientist. My own academic training is in the fields of medieval studies and British history and education. While I treasure the medieval vision that all disciplines are rooted in God, and that theology is the queen of the sciences, I have come to believe as a parish priest of 30 years that human beings, all of us made in the image of God, male and female, that our apprehension and engagement with concepts and actualities like freedom has both a developmental and contextual reality. All conversations around freedom are defined by the participants and the state of the culture in which it is being discussed. So, the very context of where we live, the very history of our nation, are part and parcel of this discussion. This raises in my own mind, what is the benefit of any conversation in 2012 that does not include persons who have experienced and continue to experience oppression from the majority? Ultimately, this conversation has to be as broad as possible. The liberation theologians got it right in the sense that all have something to say. They say it best when they form communities. The church does her best work. She recognizes that in the context of the preferential option for the poor. Now, I fully realize as a white Anglo-Saxon, scion of the historic oppressor, being successor of the Church of England. I think a few points were made that way. Thank you, Brother Benton. That the Church of England and the Crown, it anoints and validates. I'm put in the mind of the reality that my predecessors, ecclesial and political, forcibly ejected Jews in 1290 during the reign of Edward I. And for 300 years, there was no Jewish presence in the British Isles. John Wesley, a priest of the Church of England, was severely limited by the hierarchy of his day, and therefore felt compelled to presbyterally ordain elders for work in the colonies. While Lord Baltimore was given proprietorship of the colony of Maryland to be a haven for Roman Catholics, it was still the age of the penal laws when they could be burned at the stake for treason, hunted down, drawn and quartered, and persecuted for allegiance to the Roman pontiff. Radical reformers were treated much the same way, and many felt compelled to escape England to establish their lives anew. Think of the Pilgrims and the Puritans, the commonwealths that they established in this country. By the way, to show his even-handedness, Henry VIII, who all people say, yeah, you know, you're from that church that was established by him, burned 6 Puritans and 6 Papists at the stake as one of his last acts before he died. Yes, but he was very much a product of his age, product which really, an age which really kind of brought together in the person of Cardinal Wolsey, both state and church in a way it had never been the whole of Western civilization. And yes, Henry's issue was an issue of foreign jurisdiction and praemunire, as he made. But interestingly enough, that very church which he claimed headship over began to push him, or at least his successors, in a way to understand a different role. While somewhat self-serving for an Episcopalian of Norman Scots descent to laud the insights of the Scottish Enlightenment, I believe this foundational intellectual emphasis, which informs much of American notions of freedom, did not produce mature fruit as we prosecuted the War of Independence and worked to establish a new government based on the ideals of the Declaration of Independence. It was the Scottish Enlightenment that opened the doors for a number of ideas that were really not held by the majority. It was the majority opinion that people of African descent were not full human beings of the day. And it was a Scottish lord of the bench, of the judicial bench, Lord Kames, who refused to accept a notion and said that if given the same opportunities, more than likely they would produce maybe even a greater society and culture. And ultimately, in the case of Joseph Knight, he rules that no man by nature is the property of another, something which English common law would never have led them to come to. But rather, the Scottish Enlightenment had such influence that Lord Kames could work outside of those particular parameters. Debate, compromise, even conflict of arms shaped this country. Think of the Whiskey Rebellion, the first tax revolt within our nation, as opposed to against the Crown and the Tea Party. Shaped the likes of the Articles of Confederation, the Constitution, the Federalist Papers, and the Bill of Rights. It has taken many generations, and I expect it will take many more for us to live fully into the implications of those hallowed documents. Think, for instance, about the phrase from the Declaration of Independence, which has so empowered our country over the generations. Referred to by my predecessor at this podium, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The generation that wrote these incredible words saw no conflict in limiting those rights to white landowning males. Over time, we as a nation have expanded the meaning we ascribe to these words to include non-landowning males, descendants of Africans brought to this land as slaves, women, the physically and the mentally challenged, immigrants from every culture, race, and nation. We continue to struggle with the boundaries suggested by our religious, cultural, and social mores. Witness the current battles over immigration, marriage equality, and the proper exercise of formational and developmental guidance by those who do not conform to patterns of human sexuality that are held by the current majorities. I have learned over time that being forced to come to terms with individuals and groups who do not have the same vision or moral or religious construct as held by those in the majority has the potential to open new vistas for all willing to participate.